Welcome and thank you all for joining us for this episode of the Crexi Podcast, an insider's look at all things commercial real estate. In this show, we cover a broad range of topics that both cater to commercial real estate newcomers and industry leaders alike. I'm your host, Yannis Papadakis, Business Development Manager at Crexi, a comprehensive digital commercial real estate platform designed to empower all commercial real estate professionals with the tools they need to discover and transact property. As a part of that mission, the Crexi Podcast hopes to provide a window into the inner workings of commercial real estate for this generation and the next. And today we are thrilled to sit down with the one and only Randy Blankstein. Randy, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here. Crexi Podcast is the big time for commercial real estate podcasting. So, thrilled to be here. This is not a low budget operation.
Kind of you to say. A little bit of background on Randy. Randy Blankstein founded the Boulder Group in 1997 when he was only 27 years old. More than 20 years later, the Illinois-based company is one of the top 10 largest brokerage firms of single-tenant net lease deals in the United States. The Boulder Group has closed over $6 billion in transactions and represents properties in at least 42 states. In 2014, 2019, and 2020, Randy received honorable mention for Net Lease Executive of the Year by Commercial Property Executive Magazine. And in 2018, he was inducted into the Real Estate Journal Real Estate Magazine's Commercial Real Estate Hall of Fame. A Chicago native, Blankstein earned his bachelor's degree from the University of Colorado at Boulder's Leeds School of Business. In addition to leading his company, Blankstein also serves as the chair of the Net Lease Summit Conference. Wow, what a storied lead up. Let's dive into it. So I'm a little curious before we get to our talk track here. At 27, you founded this company. I mean, I know at 27, I was not nearly as tuned in to my business mind. What was going through your head then? What were your friends doing at that time when you said, "Hey, I want to start this company and start this group"?
Well, I think you have to be wildly naive to think in your 20s that you are capable of doing anything of this nature. But luckily, I was with a lot of hubris. My friends were at mid to junior levels of a lot of companies. I was on a different kind of track, and we also were a few months away from having our first kid as well. So my wife thought I was crazy. But there really is no good time to leave a firm paycheck and go take a risk to be on your own. You just have to go at a certain point. I know a lot of people who waited for the right time and who are still at that old company or who never did it. Some regret it, some don't. I mean, there's no right choice. It depends on who your personality is. But again, there's no good time to do it. I figured I would do it before I had a mortgage and before I had kids, even though it wasn't by much. And there was a unique opportunity. I was prior to founding the Boulder Group, I was with a firm that's been acquired twice and is now Cushman and Wakefield, owned by them. And I saw this little niche. I was running the AT&T industrial portfolio for the Midwest, and part of that, a lot of people wanted to buy our facilities in the net lease field. They own these properties since the 50s and 60s, and they wouldn't sell it to us as a company because they're like, it's a taxable event. I've tripled my money in the value, and you need to help me figure out where I'm going to go so I don't have to pay the taxes if I'm going to sell it to you. So, I had to go identify replacement properties, which wasn't my job, but I did it to make the other transaction work and realized, hold on, this is kind of a niche. And it's not like it is today where there's, 10 net lease REITs and it's a cottage industry and there's conferences and it's a huge, part of the commercial real estate world, I think around 12%. Back then it was just people that owned single tenant buildings and leased to a few tenants, and that was the market. So a lot different than it is today. Didn't know what I didn't know today.
Right.
But it worked out well, so I'm not going to complain.
So I'm curious, what got you into commercial real estate to begin with? Like, how did your journey begin on that career path?
So, I just grew up and I had some family friends who were in commercial real estate, and they were all kind of interesting guys, if not characters. And, from their perception of the world, they made it kind of sound fun and different. And, some of them were developers and you could see their buildings going up. And, it seemed to be entrepreneurial. It seemed to be the kind of people like me were in the field that, that I related to. And, I'm a kind of believer in, I want to get out of something what I put into it. And it seemed like, entrepreneurial and, high performing hard work could potentially pay off. So, it matched a lot of my, you know, characteristics and career, and I thought it looked interesting. I mean, I didn't have any great insight as a teenager or a kid that I had to be in commercial real estate, but got a finance major in college, and I looked at finance and real estate as options, and commercial real estate seemed to be the direction I ended up going with, and I'm real happy with it.
I always joke with my friends when I was a broker that nobody is a kid on the playground pretending to be a broker. You got kids building buildings with Legos, and you got kids that want to be, astronauts and firemen. But there's nobody that's going around trying to sell the Lego buildings to other kids. But it's something that you tend to find later. But who was what was the founding of Boulder Group like? Did you have people that were there from the beginning that are still there with you? What did that look like at the very beginning?
So go back to your last question, then I'll get to this one. Was Yeah, I thought I got into the business to be a developer because that's the people I knew. So I thought that was my career path. You started the brokerage model, you move over to the development model. But when you start having some success and you kind of like it, it just becomes compelling. So yeah, I didn't grow up on the playground thinking I was going to be a broker of anything. But it turned out well. Sorry, your question was regarding
The founding, like with the early
the
days
founding.
at the Boulder Group.
So the founding was me moving into a one office um, back of someone's office, which is my father-in-law, who said, "Look, you're starting off on your own. You can go back and take one office in the back of my office, and I wish you luck." So I thought I'd be there for like 6 months, and I was there for about 4 years. Um, Working with by myself, literally doing everything for 4 years. Trying to use my old contacts, trying to make it work. Um, didn't know, again, wasn't necessarily sure I was going to focus all on net lease, which is kind of investment sales, but it turned into net lease. So, after doing that for 4 years by myself, I said, doing okay here. It looks to be good. I need to bring on some people. But, I decided that I wanted to be a boutique because as I grew, and there's only six of us now, so we're still a boutique. Um, I decided that you need to be 6 people or 600 people. You don't want to be, 50 to 100 seems to be a number that you're kind of a jack of all trades, but master of none. So I thought, we kind of be this dominant team as our own company, or we had to be, real big or sell to somebody really big, trying not to get caught in the middle. And so this niche boutique, we've kind of grown every year. And you know, Jimmy Goodman, who has been with me for the last 12 years, and John Feeney, someone came right after him, about 9 years, and the other people were, a few years out of school, et cetera, so they haven't been quite as long, but that's been kind of the core group, and we've grown the revenue year over year, almost every year, with the exception of 2008 during the financial crisis was a down year, and last year obviously was a down year. COVID, especially Q2, was not great for us.
Got it. Yeah. And I mean, we saw that across the board. I actually had the good fortune back in my past life when I was wearing my broker hat to work and close a deal with Jimmy. And the professionalism and just straightforward, get the deal done attitude of your group really impressed me all the way through. It's one of the deals that I particularly remember being um, one of the smoothest transactions, which almost never happened in my commercial real estate career. But all I can say is nice things about your group to anybody that asks. So I'm curious now, what drew you to Net Leases in particular? I think you said at the beginning it was a boutique. You kind of focused on several different things. How did you hone in on Net Leases?
Well, first of all, thanks for the compliment. We tend to be no nonsense. Sometimes people call us no fun, but transactions get done, and our reputation's grown. So hopefully it's the right thing. Um, Again, I saw kind of this net lease world before it was an official thing. Now now that there are net lease world people, everyone specializes in some specialties. We'll talk about drugstores today, but it's people that just specialize in drugstores, and specializing in net lease was the time the equivalent, which is, oh, you're involved in this sector. I liked it for a variety of reasons. I mean, I think it's, I connect with the tenants, they're recognizable tenants, they're tenants I know from firsthand experience. And for the most part, our client base is kind of high net worth, um, you know, later in their life cycle as they transition out of multifamily and other things into kind of a more passive lifestyle if they head to Florida or somewhere else in retirement. And that's kind of our bread and butter people. And I kind of, like that crew. It reminds me of my father and my father-in-law. And it's been a good niche that, it's typically multiple transactions with the same people. So like the continuing relationship ability of it. Um, and, again, I think we needed to have a specialty, and this was one that we had some success in and some background in. So, we kept to it. We didn't expand. We didn't do leasing. We didn't do development. We don't do property management. We're very narrowly focused, but it's worked well for us. And, year after year, we have repeat clients. And so, it's turned into, quite a business
Right.
over time.
And you mentioned, second quarter last year. I think everybody, kind of felt that throughout the industry. I'll use that as kind of a segue to dive into pharmacies and taking a look at that sector as a whole. What do you see are the like foundational investment principles of pharmacies and drugstores?
Yeah, I mean, look, the narrative before COVID was, pharmacies were getting encroached by Amazon, and there was this, what share of e-commerce is that going to take away from the pharmacy business? So, there were some questions regarding they are always going to be sustainable business, but would they have smaller footprints, or would Amazon get a big market share, or would their pill pack venture, take in the market? So there was a lot of kind of open questions around pharmacy, and it was always a good sector, stable, reliable, and it's kind of been our staple, bread and butter, whatever you want to call it. Since I started the firm, everybody always want, Walgreens was kind of it's a hometown tenant right next to us in Chicago, and B, it's just kind of a thing that everyone kind of compares everything. Is it better or worse than a Walgreens? Is kind of a thing. So, um, that was the drugstore sector. So, when COVID hit, people kind of realized that, they're open, they're an essential business, and they're investment grade. They never had rent deferrals. They never had any hiccups during the whole COVID crisis. Actually, they became, more essential. They became, obviously part of the infrastructure of the vaccine distribution in the country. And so, they really came, they were out of favor, but they came more back in favor as everyone decided that, look, this is a great sector because, things like the clinics and other moves that they've made, and vaccine distribution, flu shots and things of that nature, are kind of more essential, can't be encroached upon. And this is more of a sustainable business than we realized. So I think it kind of brought people, kind of back in love with the sector, and it's been doing real well since. So well now that the issue is that it's picked through a little bit and supply is dropping because there's more demand than supply.
Mhm.
But again, it's a high class problem to have, and it shows the kind of resiliency of the drugstore sector over time.
Right. I remember when I was first learning about net lease deals and drugstores in particular, somebody brought to my attention, drugstores, they always have such solid just real estate fundamentals around them, right? I mean, you look at Walgreens, you look at Rite Aid, CVS, they're typically, main locations, hard signalized corners, and there's always a parking lot. If you're going to the drugstore, there's a place for you to park there, which, where I'm living in Los Angeles is a big deal, right? If you need to go somewhere to pick something up, you got to be able to get your car in there and park. And I think just those fundamentals alone, kind of give them a severe advantage over, some of their competitors in the space, minus all the, the wonderful benefits that you just mentioned as well. How would you say that they've changed over time or, stayed the same?
Well, look, I think they were a little ahead of the time because a lot of them have double drive-throughs, which is now something that everybody craves. People had single drive-throughs, and even back a little bit, a lot of firms were in line, um, and I think everybody's now looking almost all kinds of different tenants, not just drugstores, looking for freestanding locations versus being in a strip center, even over enclosed malls, and they want to drive through, if not a double drive through. I mean, I think everyone, like for instance, in the QSR sector, saw Chick-fil-A success with the double drive-through, and it's something that they definitely want to imitate. So I think the drugstore sector was early with that double drive-through concept, um, and they've been experimenting with clinic concepts for a while now, as far as becoming greater healthcare providers and the like. CVS did an acquisition a few years back in 2018 with Aetna for insurance. So I mean, they're trying to expand their role in the healthcare services industry, not just be a store. So I think obviously that's advantage. And then they're messing with their floor plates, experimenting, I should say. Um, Walgreens is testing a thing called the Cooper model, which is named after the Mini Cooper, which is a 2,500 square foot version of a Walgreens, which has a drive-through and has healthcare focused selection, but it's missing the soda section, the food section, the card section. It's trying to get into smaller markets and to larger markets with a less footprint, which is less rent, a quarter the size of their traditional store. They have about 30 up and running, and they're kind of seeing how they're going. So everyone constantly is experimenting with the right floor plate and the right omni-channel business model. And, drugstores are no different at the moment.
Right. Can you dive into the differences of the top three pharmaceutical tenants, Walgreens, CVS, and Rite Aid?
Yeah, I mean, look, Walgreens and CVS are far superior from a number of locations perspective, from their investment grade perspective, and from a market cap perspective. CVS is around a $100 billion market cap company. Walgreens is a $50 million market cap company, and Rite Aid is a $1 billion market cap company. So, CVS and Walgreens, in addition to having four times the locations of Rite Aid, much stronger financially, and Rite Aid kind of has a regional footprint in the you know in the West Coast and the Northeast, whereas Walgreens and CVS are more national players. So there's definitely a clear first two, and Rite Aid is a distant third. They're still competitive in certain locations, but they're just a distant third in general. Um,
Yeah, the thrifty ice cream isn't hitting like it used to, huh?
not quite the same. I think that I think things look good for it probably ends up like most sectors, two tenants eventually, and Reddit's already auctioned off part of themselves to Walgreens a few years back.
Right.
So I think Rite Aid, I've seen rumors of Amazon taking over them and all kinds of other things, but I think ultimately they figure they need to find a niche, and that's still a work in progress.
Right. So moving on to our next topic, net lease drugstores assets have really surged in popularity in the middle of the pandemic. What's next for the sector, in your opinion?
I think it's more of the same. Look, I think that individuals are still very interested because it plays into themes, whether it's healthcare, drive-through, essential, investment grade. I mean, it hits all the boxes, so I think a lot of people will be interested. The sector isn't really very focused on institutions, meaning 75% of all net lease transactions for drugstores are in 1031 and individual buyers. It's for a lot of reasons. One is I think some institutions have concentrations already in Walgreens, so they can't expand their concentration. B, CVS and Walgreens have flat leases in the primary term, which doesn't go well for dividends that need to increase every year in the public markets. So they try to shy away from them in that. And then currently, that they're trading in the low five cap rate range is below the criteria most institutions would prefer things six and above today if they
Right.
could get them. So it's mostly an individual based investment market for the moment.
And while preference for, net lease, due to relative stability during the pandemic, do you think that this will last or change? I mean, as, more, vaccinations get out there, do you see drugstores still having that, strong foothold in this kind of position that they're in now, or is that going to shift?
I mean, look, they're obviously not going to do the same kind of business because of the initial vaccinations. It's kind of a unique one-time event. But look, they're already talking about booster shots, and then once that's done, I mean, people still go back to flu shots and other things. And there's still clinics for everything from a sinus infection to a common cold that draw people there. So I mean, they're not supposed to be a huge growth stock. They're supposed to be slow, steady performers. Like the bond market, they just go about their ways and they have a good core business. But I mean, they're not gigantic growth ahead, but I think they're core solid performers going forward.
Right. And I mean, did you see any kind of leasing changes that occurred during the pandemic? Rent negotiations, deferments for longer lease terms, anything like that that was happening?
They didn't do it. I mean, look, they didn't have to do rent firms because they were never closed. They never had a business drop, like the majority of tenants that sought that. But Walgreens still, because of their acquisition of some Rite Aid facilities, still had some overlap and got a little tougher during COVID in the last year and a half for rent reductions and extensions. So they've been trying to, leverage themselves to better position, lower rent moving forward. And also they've been able to, over time, change lease terms on new locations from 25 years when I first started to 20 years to now they're at 15 years because it's a tenant market to a large extent, and they're trying to take advantage of a shorter term leases. So you know, um, that's an issue with Walgreens at the moment. So you really want to focus on store performance so you can do well during those negotiations.
Absolutely. And as supply adjusts and these tenants, reshape their occupancy, floor layouts, et cetera, what changes in transaction velocity have you seen in the first half of 2021?
Net lease volume for drugstores was down 13% year over year. But that's first quarter. I mean, look, the January, February last year, people forget was very strong before we entered into, the March, April period, which obviously came to a screeching halt. So
Mhm.
it's a tough comp. And B, look, a lot of stuff got picked over in the second half of last year because everyone was looking for essential, and it was very much and kind of still is a have or have not type of market where everybody wants a long-term investment grade in a major market and nobody wants a third-tier tenant in the boonies with the short-term lease. So they're still on the right side of that equation, and it's still compressing cap rates today for the product, and it's getting harder to find quality product. And again, people are still chasing for the most part top 50 metros.
Right. You mentioned that Walgreens has a large number of leases that are ending in the next 5 years. Any chance of tenants seeking any kind of rent reductions or consolidation?
Yes, I mean, look, there's certainly not going to be some of the Rite Aid stores that they bought, which are within a half mile or very close to them, sometimes on the other intersection. Those are all not going to be staying. Some of those landlords are going to be under, pressure to reduce the rent, and even some of them, may just not be able to maintain them as a tenant. I mean, look, they're obviously going to get rid of locations that are bad, fundamentally real estate. Mid-block locations, things without signalized intersections, things without drive-throughs. They're going to try to upgrade their position at a time when, a they can, and b there's some, softness in the retail rental market. Walgreens is looking at it as a time to kind of upgrade their position or pay lower rent on existing locations that they like.
So, putting my landlord hat on, if let's say I owned a Rite Aid that was acquired by Walgreens, and it's let's call it close to another Walgreens, and for all intents and purposes, you know the real estate fundamentals are pretty similar, right? Maybe the only difference is the lease rate they're paying now. Is there anything that I can do as a landlord to incentivize Walgreens to stick with my location, or is it really an internal, what the numbers look like, store sales? What remedy is there as a landlord to try to keep that tenant there as opposed to picking the other location down the road?
Well, look, sometimes it's out of your control, meaning sometimes you're on the highway location on the way home at the end of the day, and because of it, the other store's way outperforming you. And there's just nothing you can do about that. And that's obviously a prime time of the day, being on the right side of the road on people's way home from work is obviously a huge plus. So certain things you can't correct. But things you can is look, you can look at the expiration of the other Walgreens that you're competing with. You can look at the rent they're paying, and you can look at your facility versus theirs. You can certainly offer to do some upgrades, even if you may not be required to do them, such as redoing the parking lot or petitioning and help them with zoning requests to get another drive-through or something else to improve the real estate of the property. And then if that fails and you don't have the better location, that's where we start to talk about rent reductions to be more competitive. And you could get that done early prior to lease expiration. So maybe the leverage with 6 months to go is probably in Walgreens' favor. With 3 years to go, you may have more leverage because they have a contractual lease for a few more years.
Now, let's say that you haven't, really had an open line of communication with, Walgreens as your tenant, up to this point. Is that something that you reach out to, to you for to try to help with, or where do you start on that road?
We typically don't do Walgreens lease renegotiations, but I can certainly, put people and anyone in this podcast who wants to, contact me. I'm happy to put you in front of the right person at Walgreens to begin that conversation. And I think it's the best direct conversation because you should have a long-term relationship with them, not just during rent reduction or renewal options, but kind of on a day-to-day and week-to-week, just to see if there's anything you can do. Or and a lot again, sometimes it's something that benefits you, and sometimes it's something that may not. But build your relationship. But I think people should be much more focused, even though on a triple net lease there is no day-to-day responsibilities. So people either get lazy or just choose not to participate in an active relationship with a tenant. It's smart to kind of understand what they're doing. I had someone who says, "Look, we really don't like your store, but we like you as a landlord." And the developer that owned it got to build a new one for them that replaced his home store, and he kind of controlled the process and ended up doing much better than if he had taken a line of stay here or else. He got to be involved in the other transaction, knew it was happening years in advance, and was able to re-tenant the other property to I think it was Advanced Auto Parts. So it ended up a little bit better than if he had had no relationship with Walgreens because he got a develop the new one, make that profit, and maybe give some of it back on the Walgreens that left.
Nice. Well, fourth topic, finally, what advice do you have for investors that are seeking to enter the drugstore net lease sector?
Look, by far the most important thing is store sale performance, and each of the different three have different metrics and different average store sales. But that's the key number to know. A little bit harder to get CVS sales than it is Walgreens and Rite Aid to report a lot of these locations, but ultimately understanding the profit and loss and where your rent fits in is important. So that's the number one thing you should be looking at is what the store sales are. And even if they don't report, there's other ways to get it through traffic counts and other stores in the area and trade area and local people. And so the number can be gotten even if it's an estimate, but it's really the thing you need to focus on. Outside of that, obviously you need to look at rent to market for retenanting scenarios and for negotiation leverage as to vacancy rates and where your residual rent is, and then see I think real estate fundamentals. I mean, I would be very nervous buying mid block Walgreens locations. I'd be nervous about buying things that didn't have drive-throughs, and I'd be nervous about buying things which had floor plates 16, 17, 18,000 feet that are obsolete today. So you just have to, pay attention to the fundamentals. That's what it comes down to. And, for ones that have Rite Aids or new Walgreens close by, look real closely at the competitive landscape to where yours fits in on kind of a ranking scale of what you'd want to do if the shoes were flipped.
Got it. Well, that's all great advice. Tell me, do you frequently, go out and actually kick the tires of some of these locations?
I've been to a surprising amount of them. Clearly, not all of them, but it's interesting, and I'm not sure I'm a big hit with my kids for doing this, but sometimes we've stopped on road trips at towns that I shouldn't know that I actually do, and you get to go see some of the locations, see the other tenants that and deals you've done, and it's kind of great and a little bit interesting as well. So, um, you know, makes me a person who's been in this business too long, probably.
So instead of the side of the road, Tiger Farm on the way to the hotel, you're stopping at the net leased spot to check out the bricks.
If it's not too inconvenient, yes. It depends on the mood a little bit.
Yeah, I hear that. Well, Randy, I want to really thank you for joining us and sharing your insights, especially on such an important and timely topic. We really appreciate your time today, and I know you're very busy, so thank you for taking the time to sit down with us this morning.
Thanks again for having me. We're big Crexi supporters and fans, so I like the podcast and I like the service as well. So it's great, especially putting lease term in the Crexi search has done wonders for us. So I thank you very much for that.
Yeah, no, it was. It seemed like a no-brainer, right? I mean, you want to
But yet
search by
some of your
how many
competitors,
years?
but yet some of your competitors don't have it. So I
What
don't know about
brands?
that. Yeah.
Well, where can people find you online if they want to get in touch? Social media, email. What's the best way to reach you?
The easiest thing is probably LinkedIn. But if you don't go to LinkedIn, our website, bouldergroup.com, go to the contact page. My information is right there. So happy to speak to anyone who's got questions on drugstores.
Absolutely. And thank you to everyone who tuned in today. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure not to miss the next one. Visit go.crexi.com/podcast and sign up to get the very next episode directly to your inbox. Of course, you can also subscribe to the Crexi Podcast on your favorite podcast app and check out our YouTube channel for video recordings of each episode. Goodbye, stay well, and be sure to tune in next time.